In recent weeks, significant attention has been focused on Ukraine's successful use of drones against Russia. An army that fields a large amount of drones will always have a great chance at success. However, over the last few years, a track record has emerged, showing that employing one particular model of drone leads to overwhelming rates of success. The model is the Turkish Bayraktar TB2, and since its debut in 2014, any faction fielding this drone has gone on to victory, and in fact, sides fielding the Bayraktar are undefeated in warfare. That doesn't mean the drone itself is invulnerable, but the track record speaks for itself. In an age where military victory is often hard to come by and sometimes even hard to define, each of the most overwhelming military victories of the past 5 years have been achieved by sides employing the Bayraktar TB2 drone. This positions the Bayraktar TB2 as perhaps the defining and game-changing weapon of this era of military technology. We've covered, in varying levels of depth, all of the conflicts in which the drones have been used successfully. So now we'll take a look at the drones' use in these affairs, going conflict by conflict, in chronological order. The drone's first high-profile deployments after their debut in 2014 were by Turkey itself. The drone's first use came in a theater that's not strictly a conflict, that being the long-running battle between the Turkish government and the Kurdish rebel militia group PKK, based mainly in rural mountainous areas of southeast Anatolia and Iraqi Kurdistan. Turkey used the drones to strike targets within its own territory, as well as territory within Iraq through an agreement between the two governments. While the PKK remained based in these areas, there's no evidence that they hold any territory or did before the drone strikes, thus making it nearly impossible to measure the drone's effectiveness in this arena. The next use was in neighboring Syria. I don't want to drill too much into the background of the situation on the ground itself, as the various conflicts in Syria are multifaceted and had different stages of development. The main point is that Turkey feared the power vacuum caused by the civil war, as even after the destruction of the majority of the Islamic State, it was thought by Turkey that the new situation could be taken advantage of by PKK militants using the newly established Kurdish breakaway state in northern Syria. Turkey was also concerned about remnant Islamist forces associated with al-Qaeda, the al-Nusra Front, and the Syrian Salvation Government regime in Idlib and along the border areas of northwestern Syria. The Turks had already intervened in 2016, carving out a territory for the new Turkish-backed Syrian regime, the Syrian Interim Government, which stands in opposition to the Assad regime in Damascus. This Syrian interim government is effectively a Turkish puppet state on its southern border, providing a buffer against the Islamists, the Kurds, and the Syrian situation in general. In January 2018, Operation Olive Branch was launched, focusing on the northwest Kurdish sector and the Islamists in the Idlib sector further south. The majority of actions took place against Kurdish militias, based in the regional capital Afrin. As some of these militias were not PKK specifically, and some were indeed associated with the Kurdish breakaway government, commonly known as Rojava, this stirred up criticism by the Kurds and some allies of Turkish policy. Regardless of the diplomatic side of things, militarily the operation was an overwhelming success. Bayraktar TB2 drones would play a role, however the disorganized nature of the opposition meant that the drone's best opportunity to showcase its effectiveness was still in the future. The first use of the drones in large-scale open combat came the next year in Libya. By the middle of 2019, the situation in Libya was split between two factions, the widely recognized Government of National Accord in Tripoli and the Cyrenaica-based House of Representatives in Tobruk. The Tobruk faction's military leader and de facto political leader was Marshal Khalifa Haftar. Although not gaining official recognition, Haftar's faction was backed up by neighboring Egypt and supplied by the United Arab Emirates, Israel, France, and Russia, each to varying degrees. While their opponents in Tripolitania had large degrees of international support diplomatically, militarily they were on the back foot. Turkey saw an opening for expanded influence in the Mediterranean and began supplying the Government of National Accord with weapons and other forms of military and diplomatic support. These included Bayraktar TB2 drones. However, throughout 2019, these were counteracted effectively by Tobruk's use of the Russian-made Pantsir missile system, along with several Russian-supplied MiG fighter jets. By mid-2020, Haftar's faction was bearing down on Tripoli and eyeing the final victory and takeover of the entire country by Haftar and the House of Representatives. However, as the war boiled down to a battle for the areas surrounding Tripoli, the continual supply of Bayraktar TB2s from Turkey proved invaluable for the government of national accord in its defense. Although there was a high rate of attrition among these drones, with reportedly up to 23 being lost by the Tripoli faction, they were able to largely return the favor against Tobruk's Russia-supplied Pantsir missile systems. Indeed, by mid-summer of 2020, the Turkish-armed Tripoli faction had repelled the attack and had begun pushing the Tobruk forces back away from Tripoli, including capturing important airfields previously used to bombard the city. By stymieing Marshal Haftar's campaign to capture Tripoli, the government of national accord had effectively broken its opponent's will to fight. Marshal Haftar and the House of Representatives begrudgingly were forced to recognize this after the defeat, and by August, a ceasefire was in place, with a peace deal signed in October, setting up a transitional government to reunify the country, but mainly under the leadership of the government of national accord and based in Tripoli. The Turkish drones had effectively saved Tripoli in its moment of truth when its capture seemed imminent, and now represented the first major victory internationally for a faction supplied with Bayraktar drones. Although the drones suffered a high attrition rate, and at times, especially early in its usage, suffered from a lack of effectiveness, the Tripoli faction had still emerged victorious from the brink of defeat, plus these issues with the drones would be ironed out and its effectiveness would continue to improve in future uses. While Libya was still ongoing, in October of 2019 came another usage by Turkey of its Bayraktar system, following an American-Turkish agreement over Syria. This was over Turkey's continued concerns that Kurdish PKK militants were using the breakaway republic in northeastern Syria as a base of operations into Turkey. It was agreed that America, which had been backing the breakaway Kurds in its now successful fight against the Islamic State, would mostly pull out of northeast Syria and withdraw to the American base in the Al-Tanf deconfliction zone in the southeast, which is nominally part of the Turkish-backed Syrian interim government. Meanwhile, Turkey would be allowed to take over a border zone in the north, thus protecting the border of the Turkish state proper from PKK attacks. The Kurds in the breakaway state, however, which mostly oppose the PKK and have no connection to it, were effectively left to bite the bullet. They had no choice but to accept the loss of territory to Turkey, which would become part of Turkey's puppet state in the north. Meanwhile, the Kurdish breakaway state, which had effectively attempted to secede from Bashar al-Assad's Syria, now had to partner with the Assad regime for military protection, although it has been allowed to maintain its de facto independence at least until there's a peace deal. However, Turkey had the green light now for its invasion in the north, and it launched Operation Peace Spring. The Turkish forces, with the help of Bayraktar drones, effectively breezed through the area without very much difficulty. This territory was captured under the banner of Turkey's puppet state in northern Syria, the Syrian interim government. It marked another win for a force employing the Bayraktar. However, its role and effectiveness in these conflicts so far was somewhat limited, and thus international attention did not largely focus on the drone's place in these conflicts. This would change in the fall of 2020 with the outbreak of the Caucasus War over Nagorno-Karabakh. Although we did cover the conflicts we've been discussing, such as Libya and Syria, in our Apolitical World Map updates every 6 months out, we actually did a standalone series covering the Caucasus War over Karabakh and mapping it in real time back in the fall of 2020. So for a more detailed explanation of this conflict, make sure to check out that playlist. Here I just want to focus mainly on the use of drones and how effective they were for Azerbaijan. This is when the world's eyes were mainly opened to the effectiveness of the Bayraktar system. Azerbaijan had spent several years and billions of dollars building up a large military arsenal. Its Turkic ally in the Republic of Turkey saw an opening in the Caucasus, which for over 100 years had effectively always been part of the Russian sphere of influence. Russia's main ally in the region is Armenia, which supported the breakaway Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, in territory claimed and widely recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but populated by Armenian Christians. However, Russia was at odds with the present cabinet in Armenia, while also selling large amounts of arms to Azerbaijan and receiving pipeline transit fees from the oil-rich Caspian state. Thus, Russia was largely incentivized to sit back and watch the conflict play out. This provided the opening for Turkey to get back into the region, as although Azeris are largely a Shia population, while the Republic of Turkey is mainly Sunni, Azerbaijan is ethnically Turkic and speaks the Turkic Azeri language. Azerbaijan used its oil revenues to build up a huge drone force of Bayraktars supplied by Erdogan's Turkey. Turkey also used the opportunity to diplomatically support Azerbaijan, attempting to wrestle it out of the Russian sphere of influence. Turkey also bolstered Azerbaijan's fighting force with mercenaries from its aforementioned puppet state in Syria, the Syrian interim government. However, it was the Bayraktar TB2 drone that stole the show in Karabakh and opened the world's eyes both to the effectiveness drones can have in a ground campaign and to the Bayraktar TB2, which became well known around the world. Azerbaijan essentially used the drones to bombard areas that were about to be attacked by its forces on the ground. Armenia had lacked the resources to match Azerbaijan's military buildup, plus it didn't have even any older drones to respond in kind. In addition, Armenia decided to keep its manned air force out of the conflict for fear of Azeri attacks on Armenia proper. Thus, Azerbaijan's Bayraktars effectively had free reign over the skies. They pummeled Armenian and Artsakh units out in front of the Azeri advance. Morale for the defenders quickly collapsed as Armenian and Artsakh ground troops began to feel like sitting ducks, especially those in armored forces such as groups of tanks, which became easy prey for an enemy that effectively couldn't be contested. Azerbaijan raced along the river Aras next to the Iranian border and then launched its offensives north into the mountains towards the Artsakh capital of Stepanakert. After cutting the capital's connection to Armenia proper and capturing important hilltop strongholds such as Shusha, Azerbaijan forced Armenia to effectively surrender, and the Artsakh breakaway state was forced to give up large amounts of territory to Azerbaijan, leaving just a rump state of the breakaway republic to now be protected by Russian peacekeepers. Azerbaijan's overwhelming victory would bring the Bayraktar drone to the attention of the world's militaries. That attention would be bolstered by even more success on the international stage. In our Apolitical World Map update from December of 2021, I went into detail about the origins of the Tigray War in Ethiopia. Definitely check that out, but in short, Tigray People's Liberation Front, which once ruled the entire country of Ethiopia as a one-party socialist state, now only has control over the Tigray National Regional State ever since Abiy Ahmed came to power in Addis Ababa, ending 20 years of Tigray leadership of the country and the disbandment of the TPLF's nationwide proxy, the EPRDF, after a spat between the Tigray government in Mekelle and Addis Ababa over Abiy's postponement of the 2020 elections. The TPLF started a war against the central government, effectively making the federal state in rebellion. After Ethiopia won an initial victory, forcing the TPLF into guerrilla warfare, the TPLF would recapture Mekelle, restoring their administration of the Tigray National Regional State and resuming the conventional ground campaign against the Ethiopian central government. In late 2021, this led to the capture of Amhara, whose state administration had remained loyal to Abiy Ahmed and the Ethiopian central government. The Tigray forces were now in position to launch an assault towards the capital. With Addis Ababa now directly under threat, Abiy Ahmed not only put combat fatigues on and visited the front lines, significantly raising the morale of his troops, but he also took delivery of a number of Bayraktar TB2 drones. These drones were put to work trying to beat back the Tigrayans from around the capital. In late November, the Tigrayans had come within about 100 miles of Addis Ababa. However, with the help of the Bayraktar drones, employed in a very similar fashion to Azerbaijan to bombard the largely defenseless from the air Tigray forces out in front of advancing Ethiopian troops, the Tigrayans were rolled all the way back inside their own borders by the end of December, just over a month later. Since then, a truce has come into effect along with multiple humanitarian agreements, signaling that the Tigrayan attempt to overthrow the government in Addis Ababa is effectively over. And although steps still need to be taken to reconcile the differences between the central government and the TPLF ruling in Tigray, the conflict is essentially over, with Abiy Ahmed and the Ethiopian central government having emerged victorious and having preserved their government from near military defeat. This again caught the world's attention, as it was now the second instance of Bayraktar TB2 drones effectively saving a regime that seemed doomed militarily, with its capital under threat, the Libyan government of national accord having been in effectively the exact same situation a year earlier. Now attention has turned to Ukraine. Starting in 2019, the Ukrainian military began purchasing Bayraktars from Turkey, the Turks again seeing an opportunity to encroach on Russia's sphere of influence, and also increase Turkish standing within NATO as an anti-Russian force, especially as Turkey itself has been criticized for purchasing Russian military equipment in recent years. Bayraktars were used for the first time by Ukraine in October of 2021 as part of the frozen but still violent conflict in the Donbass. 5 months later, at the time of Russia's full invasion of the country, Ukraine had a stock of 20 Bayraktar TB2s. Although the Russians have the military technology to counter this, such as the aforementioned Panjshir missile launcher or the Buk missile launcher, and thus there's been more attrition for the drones in Ukraine compared to other recent conflicts, the drones have nonetheless proved extremely effective in multiple capacities, with numerous successes against Russian ground units. Ukraine is also committed to purchasing more Bayraktars from Turkey, hoping to replace the drones lost to attrition so far. The Bayraktars have proved so effective in Ukraine's victories and successful defense that a wartime song has been written in Ukraine called Bayraktar. The song was not written by any official source, but has since been officially endorsed by the Ukrainian army and is frequently played on civilian radio stations.
Bayraktar. Bayraktar.
The profile of the drones was raised even higher on April 13th of 2022, when multiple Bayraktar TB2s played a role in the sinking of the Russian Black Sea flagship Moskva. Although the flagship was not sunk by the Bayraktar drones themselves, the drones had played a role in disrupting the communications and missile defense of the ship, also reportedly playing a role to assist the Ukrainians in targeting the vessel. Ukraine's victories and its continued fierce resistance signal yet another international success for the Bayraktar drone, which has not only seen overwhelming success in offensive campaigns, but has also proven to be a fierce obstacle in blunting enemy offensives and launching subsequent counterattacks. Few, if any, pieces of military equipment in recent decades have achieved a string of victories on par with those of the Bayraktar TB2. Where its legacy goes from here remains to be seen, but at present it represents one of the most formidable weapons in warfare today, and has duly earned its outsized reputation. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, check out the project that forms the basis for these videos at apoliticalworldmap.org, and donate on Patreon if you can. Thanks again for watching. I'm Alex. I am out.